Hello lovelies and welcome back to my channel. This week we are talking about a book series that I fell desperately in love with upon reading the first book, and I bought the first three all in one shot, and then as soon as the fourth one came out I bought that one. So before we get into the books, I'm going to tell you a little about my candle for the day and we'll talk about what I'm drinking. So I'm going to start with the candle today, and I'm gonna light it after I show it to you, but this is a candle I'm absolutely obsessed with, and this is obviously not sponsored. I have like 3 viewers right now, but this is the Haunted Candle from Magic Candle Company, and it is designed to smell like the Haunted Mansion at Disney World and Disneyland, and probably the one at Disney Tokyo. There's a bunch of them around the world, and it's designed to smell like the Haunted Mansion. It has scents of cedarwood and classic vanilla. It smells really good. It's got a beautiful little woodwick candle, and I really love the fact that Magic Candle Company themes their candles around the ride without it smelling like an exact recreation. Like, I don't smell this and think it smells like a ghostly mansion that's full of cobwebs. I smell it and I think of the joy that the Haunted Mansion gives me, and the like older smell of it, the cedar with the vanilla, really combines to make just a happy, haunty, mansion-y smell. So I'm going to go ahead and light this, and then my drink for today is just a standard Bigelow cup of Earl Grey tea, because this book series that we're talking about today is what actually made me even try Earl Grey tea. I had always been more of a fan of fruity white teas, and I wasn't a huge black tea fan unless it was iced tea. But when I was reading these books, because of when and where they're set, a huge part of the main character's life is her obsession with Earl Grey tea. Like, every time she talks about drinking something, she's talking about how she needs a good cup of Earl Grey. And so I wound up getting some Earl Grey tea in a tea subscription box that I was subscribing to at the time I was reading these for the first time. And as soon as I tried it, I immediately fell in love with Earl Grey. And so every time I talk about or read these books, I feel like I need to have a nice strong cup of Earl Grey with me. So with that all said, today we're going to be talking about the Stalking Jack the Ripper series by Kerri Maniscalco. I am obsessed. These books were all published under the James Patterson Little Brown imprint. So part of how I got into these was Barnes & Noble last summer was running a deal on all James Patterson books where it was buy one get one half off for all of the James Patterson books, and I clicked on it because I like James Patterson as an author. I've read a bunch of his stuff, and I figured I'd look through them. And what I didn't know until I clicked into it was that they were including all of his James Patterson Presents books as part of this deal. So I was able to get some really fun books from some newer authors who I hadn't really heard of for less money, because James Patterson was helping to kind of get them out there and sponsor them. And as part of that, he writes a foreword for most of the books on his imprint, and it's usually just a 1-page foreword. It's not overly much, but it usually talks about why the book was specifically chosen to be published by James Patterson's imprint. Specifically because this is a YA series, it's under his Jimmy Patterson Books YA and Young Readers imprint. And this book, Stalking Jack the Ripper, is Kerri Maniscalco's first ever novel, which James Patterson specifically says was one of his, he knew from the first line of the book he was going to love it. And it is the first book that he published under the Jimmy Patterson Books imprint. So it's a really cool, intriguing series, and reading his foreword really got me in the mindset of knowing that I was going to enjoy this book. So the concept obviously revolves around Jack the Ripper, as the series name kind of hints. So the back of the book really is intriguing because the brief synopsis on the back of this paper cover just says, "He murdered women in cold blood. He terrorized an entire city. He taunted those of us who hunted him down. But despite all these horrors, in the end, I could not deny it. I was the girl who loved the Ripper." Now that gives you some thoughts about what the book might be about. But let me tell you, you cannot predict how this book is going to go. It is a beautiful, twisting tale of figuring out what is going on. And it all follows one main character who I absolutely love her. And she's a badass, really. So it's obviously set in the time of Jack the Ripper. So England, kind of Victorian era novel. And the main character is named Audrey Rose. And she is apprenticing under her uncle as basically a mortician, kind of forensic scientist mishmash of this Victorian era. So doing all of the postmortems on murder victims and using the earliest of forensic tools to try and figure out what's happening with the crime. And as part of this apprenticeship, she's keeping it secret from her father because he's very protective over her. But because of this, she is so strong and such an outside the box protagonist for a novel set in this time period. She is a strong young woman who doesn't let that affect her femininity or her belief in the fact that women are equal and women are strong, and it is not her father's place to tell her what to do or her uncle's place to tell her what to do. And she believes that she is smart and capable and that she can solve the mystery of who Jack the Ripper is. And that's so refreshing because a lot of times YA tries really hard to make strong female protagonists, but in doing so they lose certain aspects of what it means to be a woman in that time period or that place, or just what it means to be a woman in general. Making a strong female character doesn't mean that you have to take away her femininity, her soft side, her love for her family, or her moments of insecurity, or any of those other things that feel so integral to being a teenage girl especially. And so it was really refreshing to read a take on a teenage girl who could be all of those things, and it didn't feel forced, and it didn't feel like they were trying to make a character that was above the times. So they weren't making a character set in the Victorian era who didn't feel like they could be in the Victorian era, who felt too modern and too out of time and out of place. It felt right. And this book, it was another book that I read super fast. I devoured the book. And when I bought it, I bought all of the first 3 books at the same time as part of this James Patterson deal. So the first book, Stalking Jack the Ripper, I own in paper copy. The second book is Hunting Prince Dracula, and I own that in softcover as well. And then the third book, Escaping from Houdini, was still very new when I bought them last summer, so I own it in hardcover. And oh my god, I have to show you because this is one of the most beautiful hardcovers because it is so simple. It's just a beautiful purple with a black spine, but this gold embossing on the spine of what the title is absolutely drives me wild. It is so simplistic and beautiful. And just on the front cover, you can see the little LB for Little Brown Publishing is set into it, and the little Jimmy up on the top for the Jimmy Patterson imprint. It is just gorgeous. And the covers for all of these novels are stunning. And I love the way that they incorporate something about the novel into the cover art along with what is obviously supposed to be Audrey. So, it's a beautiful retelling, and it brings in characters who are so fun and so novel. And so this first book focuses on Jack the Ripper, and without giving anything away, the mystery is wrapped up in such a way that the rest of the novels do not focus on Jack. So that moves us into the second novel, which is Hunting Prince Dracula, which makes you a little confused because anybody who knows anything about the Dracula story knows that while the novel was published around what would have been Audrey's time, Audrey or Aubrey? My brain is blanking on how to pronounce her name. So part of that is because it's Audrey Rose. Part of it, for a lot of the novel, she and the other main character, Thomas, refer to each other exclusively by their last names. So she is Audrey Rose Wadsworth, and he is Thomas Cresswell. So they call each other Wadsworth and Cresswell for a lot of the book. A lot of all of the books. And so Audrey, her time period would be around when the novel Dracula was published. But the actual origins of the idea of Dracula have often been stated to be around the Romania, the castle. All of this is around Vlad Tepes, who was much earlier than Audrey's time. So the idea of hunting Prince Dracula becomes strange. Are you talking about the character? Are you talking about Vlad Tepes? So I was very intrigued. How are they going to take this? And I really like what they ended up doing with it, because it isn't actually specifically about Dracula the man, either the character or Vlad Tepes. It is a much more interesting interweaving of the idea of Dracula's origins and the vampire idea into a mystery. And it's really cool because the first one is set in London proper, obviously. Here we move to Romania for the majority of the book, and they do that by sending Audrey Rose and Thomas to go study at a school of forensics in Vlad Tepes' castle. And she goes and is studying there with Thomas, and obviously a mystery occurs. There is a murder. There's multiple murders, and they are there studying forensics, and they use their skills of deduction and their study of forensics to try and get to the bottom of what's going on. And part of what I love so much about this book, I won't spoil who the characters are so that you can find it out on your own, but in this, the second book of the series, a LGBTQ romance is introduced. And I am always a fan of having an LGBTQ romance appear in a book, and it's incidental that they're queer. It's not the main part of their character. It's not what they contribute to the plot. It's just a side note. They just happen to be queer, and they happen to love someone of the same gender. And that is executed so beautifully in this book, and it makes me really happy to see. So before I move on to the other books, I'm going to have a little pause here. If you see it in the video, I have to take the tea bag out of my tea, or it's going to get really bitter. So if it looks to you like I have moved in the video, it's just a cut from me leaving my seat and coming back. Okay, I am back. So, Hunting Prince Dracula, as I said, it really focuses on the idea of vampires and how it interweaves with murder. And it brings some really cool threads of family and more of Thomas's background, and it really makes you see more of who Thomas is, and it makes you love both him almost as much as you love Audrey Rose, and it brings in some fun new characters who can kind of be woven into the future stories, which I really like. So that brings us to the third one, Escaping from Houdini. Now, I was intrigued again, because Houdini was very young at the time that these novels are being written. He was alive, but he wasn't going to be Houdini yet in the time period where this is set. So it is really fun the way they kind of do this. And again, they change locations, so they're not back in London, they're not in Romania. Instead, they set sail on a boat, the RMS Etruria, en route to America with her uncle, where they're supposed to be starting a new investigation. And there's this carnival on the ship called the Moonlight Carnival. And they do nightly entertainment for 7 nights. And people are dying. And so they're stuck on this boat trying to solve these murders. And they know it has to be someone on the boat who's killing, because there's no one else it can be. And this is the only moment in the series where they try a little bit of a love triangle moment, which sometimes I like in YA, but a lot of the times I'm not overly here for. Here they do it really fun because you never really doubt who Audrey's going to choose, but they just give this other layer to the main relationship in the series because of adding this extra character in. So the Moonlight Carnival is kind of run by this main character of Mephistopheles, and he has a magician on as part of his carnival, and that is Harry Houdini. And there's this character throughout the books of Audrey Rose's cousin Liza, and in this book Liza is part of the carnival, and so Liza becomes kind of a central figure of this mystery, which is a really nice, refreshing way of bringing another female character in who is different from Audrey Rose. She is also strong, but she is far more of a regular Victorian woman and very proper and very feminine, but she also wants to be more like Audrey, and she wants to have more adventure in her life, which is why she's run away with this carnival. And with Houdini, really, and that's where the escaping from Houdini kind of comes in, is he's there, but it's not at all what the main part of the mystery is. And I enjoy their use of bringing him in as a character without making it all about this man, especially because he was so young when this is taking place in. And it's just a fun weaving of mystery, and the kind of like trapped on a boat with a certain amount of time, so it becomes very similar to one of those locked room mysteries or one of those older books where you get that vibe of Murder on the Orient Express. There's only one of so many people who could have done this, and we only have this much amount of time to figure it out before everyone disperses and we lose track of the killer. And it's again another element that's being woven into these stories of making sure that every novel in the series feels a little bit different from the previous one. None of them feel like carbon copies, like, oh, we're just solving another mystery in the same exact way. So I finished Escaping from Houdini, and I was like, I need more. but the fourth one was not out yet. So the fourth one came out early in my senior year of college, so last fall, only a few months after I finished reading the books. And it was actually given to me as a gift from a friend because he knew how much I loved the series, and he decided to buy it for me. So, escaping from Houdini, I actually own the Barnes & Noble exclusive version of. I do not for Capturing the Devil. But this fourth book is gorgeous. I love the way that they brought the cityscape into her skirt, just like they usually do. They always put the setting into her skirt, so you can see on the first one, you can see London, you can see the Tepes Castle, and you can see the boat on each of the other three. And then the element of her in her hands holding a dagger in Stalking Jack the Ripper, a stake for Prince Dracula, and the tarot cards showing death for Houdini. With Capturing the Devil, there is a lot of hidden hints in this cover that you don't unravel until later. Because when you're looking at the cityscape kind of in her dress, you can't necessarily tell what or where it is. And then when you look at what she's holding, it's a cane with a dagger end wrapped in a snake, and she's wearing a large ruby ring. And so it's not as obvious what that has to do with the story as it was in the earlier book covers, and I really enjoy that. And again, it has that same beautiful hardcover style as Houdini. This time it does not have the LB on the front, but it is yellow, black, with the beautiful gold embossing. And this book, in the name, it's a little harder to figure out who from history they're theming it around. With Capturing the Devil, it could kind of be anyone. So I'm going to read what the quote on the back is, which is, "He once said the devil was within him and stayed all his wicked life. No one knows how many lives he's taken, but I'm certain one of our stories will end in hell." And then it's a photo of a key with a room number attached, and it says 4, and there's blood on it. Now, when I got this book, my best friend and roommate read the inside cover before I did, because I just added it to my TBR pile, but she wanted to look at it, and she read the inside cover synopsis and told me who the book was about, which is written in the synopsis. It's very easy to tell, because the inside synopsis says, "She swore she couldn't live without him. The devil is pleased to comply. Audrey Rose Wadsworth and Thomas Creswell have arrived in America, a bold, brash land bursting with life. But like their beloved London, the city of Chicago has dark secrets. When the two attend the spectacular World's Fair, they uncover a sickening truth. The once-in-a-lifetime event is tainted with reports of missing people and unsolved murders." Now, I'm not going to keep going no, there's no spoilers in this, so I'll keep going. Audrey Rose and Thomas begin their investigations only to find themselves facing a serial killer unlike any they've encountered before. Identifying him is one thing, but capturing him, especially within the infamous murder hotel he built as a confusing and terrifying torture lair, is another. Will Audrey Rose see her final mystery to its end, or will she fall prey to her most cunning adversary yet? So there was a little bit of spoiler in the bottom part that I cut out for you. But any of you who might be into true crime, history, and the like might have heard the words Chicago, World's Fair, Murder Hotel, and been able to figure out who this book is about. Which is what my roommate did when she read the inside cover. And she told me who it was about, which I also would have figured out from the inside cover. And that is the infamous H.H. Holmes. Now, if you don't know who that is, he was a very prolific serial killer who, as you can kind of tell from this, set up a hotel to murder people. He had this big hotel right in Chicago during the time of the World's Fair. And when people, especially young women, would check into the hotel, he had all of these contraptions set up in the room. So piping in the vents, which would feed poisonous gas into the room, or trapdoors that would drop them into the basements where he would torture them. And he had ways of hiding the bodies. And so he actually murdered a bunch of women and was a very prolific serial killer at the time. And nobody realized. They knew the girls were missing, but they had no idea where to look for them. And then finally they were able to figure out that all of these girls were going missing at this hotel, and they were able to find the bodies he was hiding. And H.H. Holmes was arrested and put on trial and sentenced to death. And it's a very well-known serial killer story and case that gets studied all the time, especially in the true crime community and such. If you want more of a nonfiction telling of that story, there are lots of podcasts out there. There is also a really good novel, which is a nonfiction called Devil in the White City, and that book is on my TBR. I've read parts of the beginning of it, but I haven't read it all the way through, but I'm very familiar with the author's work, and he does a really good job with nonfiction of telling the story and getting as many facts, and he only uses actual quotes found from evidence when talking about the stories of the people in his nonfiction novels. This, however, is obviously fiction and is more of a telling of Audrey Rose's story, and less specifically about H.H. Holmes, but it brings facts we do know about the H.H. Holmes case in to the plot in a way that makes it feel real and feel like Audrey Rose could have been there. So it does a really good job of interweaving truth with fiction throughout the whole series. And part of what I love is that at the end of every novel, Kerri Maniscalco has a section of the book. I have to get out of the Huntington's Dracula. So she has a section of the book before the acknowledgments, which is her author's note. And her author's note always has a section that it says historical and creative liberties taken. And so she goes through basically the main points of the novel and goes through what she took from history and what she changed, and kind of giving you more of an idea of where she changed history to work with the book. And then they're different lengths for each one based off of whatever she needs to talk about. And then it just kind of gives a really nice idea of what some of the truth is within the fiction. And she sometimes gives references which you can go to if you want more of a actual deep dive into the history and how to find out more about that. And then it's just really fun in all of them that she does that, because it's a nice way of allowing yourself to enjoy the beauty of a YA nonfiction that is a YA fiction, that is a historical reference or historical fiction novel, and get lost in the story, but then kind of pull back at the end and find out what the truth was and what this actually looked like without the fictional character being there. So I really recommend this series to anyone who likes historical novels, especially historical fiction and historical referenced fiction, because it does a beautiful job of interweaving a bunch of different aspects of history into one series. And if you really like mystery novels and true crime, this is definitely for you, because it takes disparate parts of history and makes them interesting to a person who likes mysteries by incorporating these Audrey Rose-based mysteries that aren't necessarily true to history beyond the first one. So overall, I love this series. I love Kerri Maniscalco. I have already pre-ordered her new book that's coming out next month. And as soon as I read it, I'm probably going to make a video reviewing it. And I'll also put a link in to my Goodreads review when I make that video. And I really recommend that you read these series. Even if you don't necessarily know if it's for you, pick up the first one and give it a try, because it's such a good hook that I think anyone who likes to read would like this series. So that's all for this week, lovelies. I know this is a really long video, but it's a really long series, and I'll probably do a shorter one next week. So like and subscribe, comment if you enjoyed this, comment any ideas of books you'd like me to talk about next, anything you think I might like based off of what I have talked about. I'm always looking for new book recommendations. And tell me about your favorite teas, coffees, candles. I'm always looking for more of those too. All right, check me out on Goodreads and enjoy the rest of your days. Mwah.